Hi, this is Chris at Agrimodis. Today we're going to talk about letting your plant data define fertility cuts. This year, most of us have had to look into just a little deeper than we're used to. How much fertilizer are we putting out, and are we getting our money's worth out of that? And if we did make a cut, did we make a smart cut? And for those people that used Agrimodis in 2025, they have this data at their fingertips. But I'm talking to more and more who wish they did. And we need to go into 26 thinking about that because in 12 months, we may be in a very similar circumstance that we are in today. And if you have the data allowing you to make strategic cuts, it'll put you at ease to know that you are making a smart decision rather than one based on gut instinct or just a financial need. A lot of this comes from our findings in 2025. In the data set, a large percentage of fields did have some level of luxury consumption. Now, we've spoken about this on some of our other nutrient-specific videos, but over 2/3 of the nitrogen samples had more nitrogen than necessary for the number of bushels they produced. Over 90% had excess phosphorus. About 3/4 had some level of excess potassium, and about half had a level of excess sulfur. So I wanted to show you one particular field. And again, if you have this data at your disposal, then you'll be able to look at your fields case by case. So if you don't have it now, you could have it at this time next year to be able to really look at these fertilizer dollars being spent. But this is a client sample. Each nutrient we look at is all from this exact same sample regimen, the same field. And this just worked out perfectly. And I'll show you what this client ended up saving per acre based on this data. So we had soil tests. We had an applied amount of nitrogen of 270 pounds with a yield goal of 240. Now I could already argue he was over applying based on his yield goal, but he was afraid of loss in the environment that he's in. So to determine did we have that loss or not, now remember with Agrimodis, we can quantify the amount of nutrients that make it into your crop. And that's what makes it so unique and so much more powerful than just leaf tissue. Because at the end of the season, we were able to quantify the amount of nitrogen in his corn crop at 345 pounds of nitrogen. The goal for his 238 bushels an acre, he should have had about 248 pounds in there, meaning he had a nitrogen excess of 97.7 pounds an acre above the goal. So as a result of that information, we're going to reduce that applied nitrogen from 270 pounds down to 200 pounds for this next growing season. Now, we also look at how much of that came back to the ground, not just what got pulled up. So here's the silver and grain information for the nitrogen out of this field. So you look at the grain removal, it's 180 pounds an acre. The stover is 166.4 pounds per acre. Now, I realize that the nitrogen being returned to the soil out of the back of the combine and what's left in the residues may not be 100% credit for the next crop. I understand that with nitrogen. But when you put this in terms of how much fertility equivalence this is, that's 47 gallons of 32%, or about 380 pounds of urea is what just that stover nitrogen content was from this field when it was being harvested. All right, so a tremendous amount of fertility getting back into that soil. Let's look at phosphorus next. We had 78 pounds applied, and then the plant content ended up being 137.7 pounds. Well, the goal was only 72 pounds, meaning we were over 60 pounds in excess above the goal. So we're going to take that 78 pounds that was being applied, and this was on every field, on every acre, and we're going to reduce that down to 30 pounds an acre. When we look at the stover and grain on that one, the majority got removed. 88 pounds of it got removed of that 137.7, but that still leaves almost 50 pounds being returned to the ground. What is that fertility wise? It's a little over 12 gallons of 1034O or about 100 pounds of MAPRDAP. So again, a lot of fertility getting spread out the back of that combine. For potassium, this grower applied 60 pounds. This is in a high K area. But the plant took up 300 pounds, which was only about 25 pounds over what the goal was for that crop. The soil has a healthy amount also. But we're still going to reduce that 60 pounds down to 40, and you'll see the results of that very soon. Now look at the stover and grain on this one though, because most of the K stays in the field. 72 pounds was pulled off, 228 pounds got spread back on top of that field. Put that in fertilizer equivalencies. What do most of us use? 0060. That's 380.2 pounds an acre equivalency of 0060 coming out of the back of that combine. And finally, we'll look at sulfur. 25 pounds is getting applied. The crop pulled up 27.7 pounds. The goal was only a little under 22, meaning we're 6 pounds heavy. So we're going to reduce that sulfur from 25 down to 20 pounds an acre because our plant test says we can. The stover in this example has 14.5 pounds of sulfur content, and that's about 1.8 gallons of ATS, a little over 20 pounds of AMS equivalency there. So when we put all those savings together, what does that look like? Here's our 70-pound nitrogen reduction. Now, I did this slide before things really started spiking here lately, but at 56 cents per pound of nitrogen, that's $39.20 just in nitrogen savings. The phosphate that we determined was unnecessary at that amount, at 90 cents a pound, was $43.20. We cut the potassium down. Again, we cut 20 pounds. Why is that important? Well, it's still $7 an acre at 35 cents a pound for K. And that 5 pounds of sulfur, that's $4.50 an acre for a total of $93.90 an acre. Now, this may be an extreme example. This may not necessarily apply to you. Maybe you're only a little high in nitrogen. Maybe you're not high in nitrogen. Maybe you're high in phosphate. But you won't know unless you test for it. Tissue sampling doesn't give you this level of data. Doesn't allow you to make a refined cut. Doesn't even tell you how much you could possibly cut. At least here, we knew how much we were in excess in the 2025 crop. So going back in 2026, we have a perfect guideline. By the way, I do hear, and this grower actually said maybe it's the mineralization rate. Well, this was barely 1% organic matter. So you're not going to be in that 70, 90 pounds in excess nitrogen due to 1% organic matter, all right? There's something else going on. So that's how you make cuts. That's how you use the sampling you could be doing in 2026, already looking ahead to a 2027 market that may be a little challenging. So thank you for your time, and feel free to get in touch if you have any questions or would like more information about Agrimodis.